let's talk about paragraphs. There are lots of ways to approach writing a paragraph. We're going to look at two specific kinds, T.E.A. and five-sentence paragraph, just as strategies or formulas to get you going. And then we want to talk about why we might want to use one of them or why we may not want to. So a paragraph needs to essentially do the same thing that we'd look for in a full essay. We want to talk about what we're going to talk about. What is it? Introduce it. We want to talk about that concept, and then we want to review what we talked about. So that's our topic. What are we going to talk about? We want our quotes, our analysis, our evidence, and then we want to review that and conclude with why we shared it. So first off, we're going to look at T.E.A, topic evidence analysis. You'll notice that these two types aren't necessarily very different, but the language can help us process what we're doing with that particular type of paragraph. So let's go look at each of these three elements. So first with the topic, we have to have a purpose. Why are we writing this particular paragraph? What's going on? We want to keep it to one topic. So you may notice when I talked about doing a reverse outline that when you struggle to write a phrase about a paragraph, most likely you've gone off topic. And that happens to all of us. I shared these things because I do them as well. So I'm not out here saying, fix that. I'm saying this is probably going to happen at some point. So let's get ready. Let's have some tools in place. So here's a sample. Hemingway uses similes to set the tone that things are not always what they seem. Next, I need some evidence. What exactly have I researched or found or explored that's going to explain this? So in this case, I have a quote. They look like white elephants, she said, from page 665 of our Hemingway story. Next, I want to analyze that. Well, why am I talking about that particular quote? What's going on with it? Every paragraph needs some sort of analysis to discuss or explore why we've presented this idea, why is this topic important, and why, how are we supporting that topic? So I have a whole lot to say about this one. I have a lot of analysis right here. At both the beginning and end of the story, Jig comments, whoops, there we are with me, typos. See, I have them too. We all have to fix them. Jig comments on the hills like white elephants. Hemingway repeats this simile in the title as well to help the reader understand that the conversation is deeper than it appears on the surface. Jig is not only commenting on the landscape, but also the couple's relationship. If we decide that the procedure is trepanning for mental illness, Jig is expressing that her observation will no longer be worrisome to the man, e.g., or that is, he will not analyze her words in terms of mental health, but as a conversational exploration of the world around them. Hopefully, the consistent, repeated anxiety of her mental health will no longer be an issue. So let's put it all together. We have one sentence, a second sentence, and then multiples exploring the analysis. So we have a topic, our evidence or our point that we want to look at, and then an analysis of how those go together. So now let's shift gears. What if instead of having so many parts in the analysis, we looked instead at the center of the paragraph? So now we're going to have our same topic. We need a starting point, but we're going to focus on three details and then give a concluding sentence. So what's it about? This is our mini hook. This is our chance to reel that reader in. What if I say Hemingway uses a curtain to symbolize the space between humanity and God? Then I'm going to give three details. We want to be descriptive, evocative. We want to give our readers a sense of the idea that we want to explore and why it's important. Notice that I'm using multiple quotes. I'm bringing in that story. I'm saying, how is he describing this curtain? The curtain is, quote, made of strings of bamboo beads hung across the open door into the bar to keep out the flies, end quote. Then, quote, the man called, listen through the curtain, end quote. And the barkeep comes outside, hearing the man from the other side of the curtain. Later, the barkeep, quote, comes out through, the woman comes, I mistyped that. I got to go double check that. Comes out through the curtains, end quote, to deliver drinks. So I have three interesting pieces. I'm using quotes. I don't have to use quotes for all of those, but I'm really bringing in multiple examples of this curtain and what's happening around that curtain. Now for my analysis, my conclusion, I'm restating the topic and walking my reader out of that topic, concluding so that I can prepare them for the next paragraph. The barkeep moves through the space of the beaded curtain as it separates the couple from everyone else except her. She represents a view of God that encompasses the ability to hear and observe from both sides of the curtain and to readily move between the separated spaces. So here it is all together. Notice that there's a lot more separation here. I have the initial part, which is my topic sentence, which remains short, but in terms of the middle and end, I have a lot more equality here. So let's go look at the concluding idea here. There is just no one way to write a paragraph. I like to look at things like the formulas as a way to help me. Um, if I am if I'm ready to go, if I'm excited about what I'm covering, I just dive in and I write. But sometimes I feel a little stuck, or I feel like I'm not quite sure what I want to do, or when I'm looking at my reverse outline, I feel like my paragraph is missing something. And that's when I go back to formulas and I say, okay, well, have I really analyzed it really well? Have I given lots of good details? And so I might use sort of both of these ideas and even more ideas, because if you go do a search, you'll find even more examples of how to write a paragraph and how to tackle that. Let's think about those two examples. Are they really that different? Could I replace one with the other? Could I sort of divide up how I'm approaching those sentences and say, oh, what if they could go together this way or go together that way? Perhaps I could change that up. So play with those ideas. Look at your paragraphs as ways to grow what you're doing. For instance, I like the idea of a 5 sentence paragraph, because I like to look at 5 paragraph essays. So the idea of 5 can work really, really well. And of course, as with all rules in English, it's meant to be broken. But I like to look at the idea of, okay, I've got to introduce something. I've got to catch everyone. I've got to reel my reader in. I've got to say, this is what we're going to talk about. Then I've got to talk about it. And that's where I like to have the idea of space. So like 3 sentences or more. I want to talk about the idea and the concept, maybe use some quotes, maybe start my analysis. Like lots of things go into that middle space. And then I want to conclude. I want to walk away from it. In a lot of ways, I tend to view it as a conversation. I don't just walk up and start talking. I walk up and I say, hi, how are you today? What's going on? And then I talk about the concepts. And then I say, okay, I got to go now. Bye. See you later. So we have that sort of envelope pattern. And I think of that in the same way for essays. I start with an introductory paragraph instead of a sentence, and I present my topic. What are we going to talk about? What are we going to catch everyone's attention with? And then those 3 concepts in the middle, those 3 details, become 3 or more paragraphs. And then I conclude my entire work. I restate what has happened and what we've talked about, and I explain why it was important. That idea can keep growing. It can become 10 paragraphs, 15 paragraphs. It can become 5 chapters in a book. It can become 5 books in a series. So it grows and shrinks depending on what we need. And of course, with all of these, we're saying things like, oh, consider 3 details. But could I not have just used 1 detail? When we look at our evidence and that middle part, there is space around the idea of evidence and analysis of what we want to share and how we want to explore it. So practice one or both of these ideas for a paragraph and see what you come up with for your essay.